and welcome to Supercharged, episode 206. I'm Adam Dotchis.
And I'm Tommy Hutton.
And last week I said 195, I think, and I corrected that, so you didn't hear that, but if it sounded a little weird or I forgot that I repeated that later and it didn't make sense, I'm sorry. I've been very busy lately and I've been forgetting things, so hopefully I won't make that mistake again. But we are on 206, I actually checked. And today we're going to talk about something that's been strangely popular and oddly we have not covered before. And Tommy brought this up.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Looking at the future of gaming, and it's a kind of a segue into a bigger topic, which is people are always looking to the next console. And so the big consoles, the Xbox, the PS4, and the Switch, looking at the future, Nintendo is kind of an outlier because they're always willing to buck trends. They're not about horsepower. They're actually about taking a cheaper piece of hardware and innovating in a way with controls, like looking at the NES, SNES, like all the originals, looking at the Switch, the GameCube. All those consoles were not powerful for the sake of being powerful. They were interesting and used the tech in an interesting way. Now, granted, at the consternation of many fans, because building for the GameCube or for the N64 were notoriously difficult. And they treated third parties badly, but they always try to find a way to innovate with their console by having a controller or a method of use for like the Wii U controller as being this innovative system. So Nintendo's the outlier, but the Xbox and the PS4, they kind of had a weird point where they're like, well, we're going to hold off on doing a brand new version of the console for a while because the console life cycle is you get a console and it lasts a while.
Yeah.
The Xbox 360 lasted a while.
It's nice not having to upgrade all the time as someone who held out on my phone for this long and I finally had to get a new one yesterday.
Yeah, it's like the phone development cycle, like the idea is how long is this stuff supposed to last? And for this, the lifespan of a console is going down because once you build a console, it's immediately outdated because it's going to come out after you begin building. And once you select your chips and everything, it's going to start being outdated the moment you select it.
And it's funny, when the PS4 came out, I was like, whoa, this is, the PS3 looked great. This is incredible. I can't believe, you see the demos of the games. And those demos are always the most impressive part. When I played Final Fantasy 15, I'm like, this doesn't look as good as it did when they were demoing it.
Yeah, the demos are meant to be sleek and the demos have their own kind of weird, torrid history.
Yeah, and so it's definitely a beautifully done game, and there are several others. I'm just thinking of that one because it was one of the earlier ones that was really, really, I would say overly hyped, but Square needed the money. That was that one was, I think, when I started to realize that so the graphics aren't that good, and then as time went on, it's like I feel like we didn't make as much progress as it always seems like we do, and that goes to what you're saying with the console being outdated.
And the only thing that really is like
by the time we get it, it feels old.
The only thing that also is really good is the system. Often, like looking at the games that, like when the Xbox 360 came out, it was the same hardware. There was like the slim version that comes out invariably after a console is on the market for a few years. They are able to make like a smaller, slimmer version of it, but it's the same hardware basically. And what's interesting is that a game coming out at the opening life cycle to the end is very different. Like looking at what Grand Theft Auto 5 was able to do on a 360, granted it's got like 3 discs that came with it, but that game looked amazing on the same hardware. It's because they're learning how to utilize the hardware to its maximum capabilities.
Yeah, and
it's like a puzzle.
Yeah, and to say something nice about Square, back in 1996 Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG looked so far beyond if you compared them to PlayStation games that did the same thing, they didn't look that different.
Yeah, they pushed that system to its core, and so it's interesting how companies are using that. So there's a weird challenge that's coming up, which is the console arms race is an arms race between the major players, and one misstep can just bankrupt a company because they spend at this point billions on a cycle building new hardware. And Sony infamously spent a ton of money for the PS3 trying to inject Blu-ray into it, and that's actually kind of what helped them win the format war with HD DVD versus Blu-ray, because Sony developed the Blu-ray technology, and by making Blu-ray be the adopted tech, they make a lot more money. So they had to lose a lot of money trying to force the tech because it was expensive, putting Blu-ray players and making that the premium format for that system. It ended up working out for them in the long run, but it was a gamble, and it could have failed miserably. So what's interesting is seeing that developing consoles is expensive.
Yeah.
And the life cycles are getting shorter and shorter.
And people aren't willing to pay the extra money that is necessary to get all those extra features that they want.
Well, yeah, so
or I should say the horsepower that you'd get from a computer that would cost a lot more.
There's always the people that joke that people that play on PC say the PC is a master race because you're able to be much more nimble, you can adjust on the fly, you're not stuck with the same graphics card or whatever.
Yeah.
So then like Steam came along and made these Steam boxes where you could play PC games on your computer, but all that was on this console-like computer on a TV, which didn't really work out very well. The biggest thing is, how do companies adjust to this? Mm-hmm. What's the future of console gaming? And we did talk about this earlier, but things really took a weird turn this year because Xbox and PS4 kind of made this weird truce by saying that their new versions of the consoles were this mid-level upgrade, where Xbox was becoming more of a platform, like a PC, than a console, where the console itself, the Xbox One, is a platform, and the original Xbox One is like the minimum bench required to run a game. But then you have the Xbox One X, and then PS4 had Xbox One X was called codename Scorpio, and then the Morpheus was the PS4 Pro. So both systems got a upgrade where it still plays. It technically is still a PS4, still an Xbox One, but when you play the game, it plays it much more pretty. It's now upgraded to 4K textures and high frame rate and all that stuff. That it still will run on the Xbox One. It won't look as good, but it's the idea that this is a HD version of the console. It's prettier, it's better, it's more efficient, but it's not going to exclude the original Xbox One owners. And that's a way to release a new console every year or 2 years that's not going to cut off your library of people. Because what you have to think about is that you're only going to sell games to people who already have the hardware. And if you have to have a brand new set of library of games, that's going to piss people off. So Xbox has been really good about doing backwards compatibility for Xbox 360 and Xbox original Xbox system games. PS4, you can stream games and pay for them. But the idea is, how do you keep people buying games without feeling like they're getting alienated? And this is something that's been hinted at. Like the NVIDIA Shield system did it.
Yeah.
Streaming.
And well, I have opinions about that being an NVIDIA Shield owner, but it does... I mean, like, there are aspects of it that are very impressive, and there are others that are less so.
And I remember even at the first E3 I went to, there was a company called OnHub?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, there was a company that did try to do streaming before. And hell, there was even streaming with the...
Oh, yeah. Oh, you know what? I might be thinking OnHub because that's
was that Google's router? Oh, yeah.
Router.
It's not OnHub, but there's some OnStar or Star... There's some kind of streaming service that existed way too early and just didn't work. But this idea has always been around, is streaming. And hell, there was the Sega Channel, which was a Sega subscription service. You would pay through your cable channel. My friend had it, where I would go to his house and play it, where you could play games by streaming them. You would stream them over your cable line, and it was for Sega. And you would just plug this cartridge into your Sega system, and it had a little cord to it, and it would stream games, and you could pick them, and you could play games that way, before the internet really allowed you to play games online. So... they're talking about, how do you keep upgrading consoles? You're always in an arms race with PC being better, with the idea that you don't want to alienate your users because you buy into a library of games, and now guess what? The new Xbox is coming out next year, and they're not compatible with your new system, so why would you buy it? You get burnt by the idea of like, well, they're just trying to make a cash grab with a new system, and I don't have to keep buying new games over and over again because I have all these games that are not functional with this new system. So this is where streaming is more attractive. And this is where Google is coming in. Google is apparently hiring up people like crazy because they're apparently interested in making a console.
Oh, I mean, they should be. Android is such a great platform for it. It's a shame that NVIDIA has only gotten as far as they have.
Yeah. So the area that they're going is streaming. So here's where streaming is interesting for games. You can offload all that hardware onto the cloud. You can play a game like The Witcher 3, which is a really beautiful game when you run it at full res, HD, 4K textures, high frame rate. It's a gorgeous game. That game is a lot of processing power. They say you could play that in a Chrome window if all that processing power is offloaded to the cloud, and you don't need a very powerful machine then.
Yeah, and I mean, game streaming is, I think this has been like an actual thing for a decade, but it's just never worked really well.
Exactly. No company has staked their entire strategy on streaming, because here is where the big crux of this discussion is going to come in, is we don't have the infrastructure for it in terms of the internet. You look at companies now, like...
I just imagine how net neutrality is going to play into this, or the lack thereof, I should say.
So look at Netflix. Netflix is a streaming company, and they work. Their entire model is based on streaming. That was interesting. Reed Hastings was really shrewd when it came from their model was DVD rental.
Yeah.
And I mean, you go from physical media to streaming.
Yeah, and just, this is going to sound a little off topic, but to insert something here, Netflix, I think, for the most part, uses Amazon AWS, I should say, to handle their streaming. Having Google take a big chunk out of that would probably be a very good thing.
Well, yeah, it would help
on the gaming side, but Amazon is, I mean, like, if you look at what AWS is doing right now, there's a lot of game stuff.
Totally.
And streaming and all that, like, they're on it too.
Yeah, Amazon's tried to make something happen with gaming, and they had a couple big first-party titles they were trying to release and stuff. That didn't work out very well.
SageMaker seems to be helping them quite a bit, though. I mean, it's still convoluted like everything on AWS. I mean, I really, really dislike AWS. I use it, because I don't know the other. I want to look at the other options a little bit more thoroughly, and it's one of those things that's, once you learn a system, it's something like this is very complicated, even though it's supposed to take they say, oh yeah, it takes out the complications of managing your own servers, and yeah, it does to a degree, but you still have to learn their whole interface, and when it goes wrong, when it's managing it for you, you have to know what to do. And it's not like it's not the sort of thing you would diagnose on a normal server. So they're all very complicated. And so there's a lot of, I think, complexity on top of that. I don't really think Google's going to offer an easier option, because that's not really their MO. I don't really see any company who could make this a simplified thing, but I really hope somebody does.
It would be nice. It would give Amazon a run for their money.
Yeah, but also on the same front of, like, it would be nice to be able to have this technology functioning and available to the consumer.
Well, that's the thing. I think when you make consumers,
I mean, the consumer side of it, not the development side.
Yeah, no. When you make consumers realize the power of, like, cloud computing and the ability of offloading tasks, the problem is that, again, we're not wired for it. So this is the big thing to consider: is how you consume internet traffic. You probably have an ISP at home. Your internet service provider is probably a major one, because there is basically legalized monopolies. There are some municipal broadband providers, which I love, having that kind of level of competition.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's not oddly, I guess, but Seattle's one of the only places I've seen where they have crazy options for internet that are, I mean, there's real competition there.
Yeah, the U.S. sucks, because there is basically a legal monopoly in the U.S. with major...
Illegal.
What?
I mean, you're saying a space legal.
Yes, a legal monopoly, essentially, where by able to say, like, that companies, they make it really difficult for a startup. So in a capitalist society, it is supposed to be direct competition for someone to say, oh, I don't like this service, I will go to someone else. And the idea that if no one else exists, you could potentially create your own service. Well, the amount of startup cost to get and make a competitor with a major company like Charter, which is now Spectrum, which is a merger between them and Time Warner.
Which has done so many good things for that. I mean, Charter, I never had a problem with.
I always did. Charter fucking sucked. I hated them.
I should say, as a company, they were very nice.
To me.
Well, not to you.
Yeah.
But they were always very sweet to me. I didn't want to switch to Time Warner, even though their service went down all the time. I was like, I don't want to give this up. They at least mean well, and I had, there is no cable company that's good, but Time Warner at least functioned. But just like when Seagate bought Memorex, it was like they got infected by Memorex's shitty hard drives, and now Seagate's doing fine, but for a while, Western Digital, which was like never buy those, theirs were far more reliable. I don't know if they actually got more reliable or if it was just by coincidence, but that happened, and I feel like once Charter and Time Warner got together, that's when our internet started going down regularly.
It's ridiculous. They claim that it's going to allow for more investment in infrastructure, but here's the problem: is the U.S. has almost little investment in high-speed internet investment. There was one point the government subsidized laying fiber, and the term is dark fiber, where companies got a bunch of money and subsidies to lay fiber, and they never used it. So,
Google did.
Google bought up a lot of dark fiber, actually.
Yeah, but they did use it. They didn't use it as much as they could.
This is back before Google even got in this game. This was back in like the late 90s. Where they saw investment in high-speed infrastructure was in fiber, and it just requires a lot of laying wire. The U.S. is a giant area, but U.S. is in an embarrassing place when it comes to internet speeds.
Yeah.
And for prices. Like, and granted, countries like Korea, South Korea, and Japan.
If we want to compete with Korea, like if Trump wants an arms race, he should be doing that. Like that, he could actually do something beneficial for the country.
Yeah, so South Korea and Japan have huge internet speeds with low consumer rates. Now, granted, the countries are smaller; it's easier to wire the whole country.
Yeah.
But Google tried to do it with Google Fiber. The problem was, even a company with their resources had a hard time. And I followed this fight closely. They would go into an area and they'd get hammered by the legalized monopoly that is Spectrum or Time Warner or Charter, because they would have all these insane legal loopholes for why they could try to harangue anyone trying to come in. And it's everything from the ability to touch wires on a pole, that they had to get permission. Google had to get permission to hang wires from a pole, and then Charter or a company would sue them and say, oh, you can't touch the wires on this pole.
Oh yeah, the government, when they tried to do in Minneapolis, they tried to do Wi-Fi for I don't know if it's just the city of St. Louis Park or if it was wider than that. I think it was just St. Louis Park. And St. Louis Park, just for people who are not familiar with the former suburb of Minneapolis, which I don't think very few people are familiar with Minneapolis, other than it's cold. Although I think everyone thinks it's colder than Chicago and all these other places. Chicago's windy. Wind is cold. Just for those of you who don't know that. But the Minnesota is not so bad. But St. Louis Park is this it wasn't even a city. It became a city when I grew up, and the government tried to do Wi-Fi for everyone like maybe 8-10 years ago. And they had a deal, I think, with Comcast to provide that. It might have been Time Warner, because I had Time Warner in my area when I was a kid. I guess I was 15 when we finally got cable internet. But they made a deal with them, set up the Wi-Fi, and then got sued by the cable company after they did it, according to the specifications, because the cable company just wanted them to fail, and they figured, I assume, that let's let them put the money in and then sue them so they can't do it.
It's absurd.
And that's what happened.
And there's even rules the FCC has now, especially under our good friend Ajit Pai, who says that local, state, and municipal districts cannot create their own infrastructure and Wi-Fi or own broadband, which is insane.
Yeah, this was before that. I think that passed shortly afterwards.
Yeah. The reason that's bullshit is that the internet's become more and more like a utility. And it should be regulated like utility, which it should be, like a phone and power service. And it should be regulated like
phones, I feel like, are less of a utility these days. I mean, landlines anyway.
Yes, but it is a utility that should allow for local municipalities to create their own. Because here's the thing, is why would a company have any interest in investing in rural broadband for people that live in small towns? They have no reason to do so.
Well, it's a problem even with cell service.
Yes.
Erica was out
absolutely
in Bozeman, Montana, and was roaming on T-Mobile. She gets better service in Mexico and Canada.
Yeah, no. When I was in Michigan, I was in the middle of nowhere, and AT&T was the dominant service, and I was on roaming. Yeah, and T-Mobile gives you a very generous.
You should never be roaming on AT&T. I mean, like that.
T-Mobile gives you a very generous 50 megabytes on roaming, which is super sweet.
You actually, it's 200 depending on your plan, up to 200.
I got 50, and it was very.
Oh, you
generous.
got 50. I thought you said 15.
50.
Because 15, I was looking at the hierarchy, and I think Erica got, and the rest of us on the family plan get 100 megabytes because we are on an older one. And their new plans are very good, but we don't use more than 10 gigabytes of data, not even close, per month. And you get a bunch of extra features for free with that one, so I haven't had cause to upgrade, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not a good situation when I'm glad I haven't run into that yet, and I don't intend to, but we need to get more rural infrastructure for. What about the people who actually have to live out there?
Seriously, and so it's insane reading horror stories about people who live and try to get high-speed internet installed, and they won't come out and do it, and they're even willing to fund or pay for the installation or the wires or what they call the hard part that Google Fiber ran into was what they call last mile, which is running from a network hub to your home or to the neighborhood. And so what Google Fiber did was create a thing called fiber hoods, which is they would set up some local station where the fiber was located, and they'd have to branch out. and literally install the fiber at each house or each apartment building. So Google Fiber ended up giving up. They are still in the same cities, but they are no longer investing in physical infrastructure. They're investing in what they're trying to do is high-speed Wi-Fi, which would be great.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, wireless eventually will fix this problem.
It makes more sense. It's having high-speed, reliable, a blanket of reliable high-speed Wi-Fi.
But we still need the wires.
Yes, you still need the wires somewhere. So the idea is you just wire up a city, and it broadcasts out, but there's no longer a cost of the last mile. So here's the challenge, is we have services like Netflix, streaming consoles, and even streaming video for like conference calls, audio, all that stuff. It's all streaming. Spotify, the way people consume music and everything, entertainment is predominantly going to be streaming, not physical media. The challenge comes up is our ISPs are wired to not allow for high-speed, unlimited content. Now, there's no reason why. They claim they're allowing bandwidth caps. So if you believe you do not have a bandwidth cap, unless you're with Google Fiber or a few like local smaller, there's one I think called Sonic, that's up in the Bay Area, that's really good. So unless you're part of a smaller, friendlier company, if you're one of the major ISP providers, you are not giving people unlimited in quotes. You're going to be capped. Look at your plan. You will likely see you have a cap. And usually what happens is...
Unless you're out here, they don't cap out in California.
Yes, they do.
Wait, who does?
Everyone. Look at your...
Time Warner doesn't. I checked.
Look at your plan.
I did. I looked at it 3 days ago, actually.
It should say there is basically a clause.
It said literally, we will not cap you.
Time Warner they have a thing that basically allows them, if you go over a certain threshold, they will contact you and basically tell you. They don't even sometimes disclose what the cap is. But everyone does, even Time Warner.
If they, it says we will not cap you. I see no data throttling anything. And if anyone is going over the amount, it's me. I guarantee I could show you how far over reasonable amounts of download I do.
Oh, no, it's insane.
I don't want to defend Time Warner in any way, and I'm not 100% sure that I'm right here, but I have never had a problem with them since I've had that service, and I've had their service for 6 years.
Because Time Warner is now Spectrum.
Yeah.
And Spectrum does have caps.
Yeah, but I've had I was informed by them specifically I will not get a cap. So I don't know if that's going to change for other people, but I think laws are a little bit stricter out here and we have less to worry about, but other areas of the country absolutely have been dealing with that for a long time. I would say anyone on Comcast should be the most afraid because they're the shittiest.
So there are data caps for these things. Now, back under Tom Wheeler's FCC, you could not put data caps on internet plans. Now you can. And as soon as the internet net neutrality rules were repealed, and as soon as Pi came in, caps were are most plans now when you sign up do have data caps. Some might be grandfathered, but over time, eventually, you might be forced to on a plan that does cap.
Yeah,
that's the plan that everyone, and which is ridiculous because it's going backwards. There was a point when America Online did charge you per hour.
Yeah,
and then it was unlimited.
That. Yeah, I had to limit my internet time, but back in the day when technology was considered an evil thing.
Yeah.
Not that it isn't now, but like on the whole, that those hours were good because they were good in my case because I wasn't allowed to be on, and I would get in trouble if I stayed on the internet too long. So that was another that was like an actual penalty cost that would be pushed onto me as a kid, which I didn't have a means of earning money really. Like my allowance would have to go to it, and that was like $2. So
basically, when Time Warner and Charter merged, there was a rule about no data caps for a period of time. But then they have in fine print that those data caps will be implemented when that time is up. So it's stupid. Like that should be a permanent cap as opposed to like. But anyway, that was part of the merger condition. But they're all there waiting in fine print saying those caps will come back.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, it's like the data caps to some degree. I think it sucks.
It's stupid. It's pointless. Like fiber and the big ones don't have it.
They do pay by bandwidth, so it's not. I mean, like their costs. If I use more internet, then that costs them more money. So it makes sense to like. I guess I don't. In a vacuum, have a problem with data caps. It should have been established that way from the start.
But the idea is if data caps are the anathema to every other aspect of our streaming services and everything else that's being implemented in terms of entertainment.
You should pay X amount of dollars for a certain amount of data like you do with a cell phone, but you should be able to go over it. Like the problem is that you can't.
Well, I disagree. I think there should be. I think everything should be unlimited. Is that the point now where?
Oh no, I definitely agree in terms of like what I would want, but trying to look at it as a compromise between both sides,
and ultimately
and making sure they have the money to continue to produce, a good service, which is they can't really do at the moment anyway. But
and the bandwidth stuff that you're saying is like it's fractions of pennies.
Yeah.
And so the big challenge is that the average consumer only uses a certain amount.
But if it's like you get 250 gigabytes, and then if you go over that, you have to pay $5 extra for the next 250 gigabytes. Like if it's something fair like that, where it's not
at this point, like with how streaming video is going on 4K video, you could go over that super easily.
Yeah, I mean, I go over it every month.
Yeah,
but I would pay an extra $5 knowing I use more data. I would think, that if that saves somebody else money who doesn't need that much, I'm okay with that. If it helps continue, like if the company, I'm saying like in a perfect world, if the company would say we need to be able to afford to do our jobs, and build out our infrastructure and all of that, and charging that extra $5 would allow them to offset a larger cost for them that is very little for me. If they were ethical and honest, which they're not.
Yeah.
If that were the case, then I would have no problem with that, especially if it also gave access to people gave people internet access who don't need that much, but wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it.
That's not.
Like, that's a situation where I'm totally fine with data caps, or paying by the data allotments. But the way that it wouldn't work that way.
Yeah.
If it would work that way, great. It won't.
But that's the thing, is the idea of treating it like water or power. It's like those are resources that have to be generated. With bandwidth, it's not this on the same one-to-one level. Like looking at every other country that has high-speed internet that's accessible and affordable is all unlimited. There's no such thing as a cap.
Yeah,
the U.S. is claiming that the caps are there to prevent clogging, but if they actually took the money and invested in infrastructure that is overseas and that powerful, there would be no clogging at that level.
Because I'm not for a level of profit sharing or revenue sharing. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but the sea level at any of these companies, the amount of bonus that they get every year, the amount they're paid is at an excess that nobody needs. And unfortunately, greed is one of those things that you don't get to a point where you're like, I'm good. Most people need more money and more money and more money. There's no cap on that. And so I'm fine with people like you get to that level, you work your way up, or I'm not looking for perfect wealth equality, but there's a point where it's just absurd. Like you're wasting money on giving it to these executives who are not really, who like you can wipe out an entire executive suite, put another set in there, no problem. The company will still function. It's a big company. Mm-hmm. So they're not doing anything that great. And anything that they do to earn the company more money tends to be dicking over their employees in the process or their customers or whatever. And so I'm of the mindset that, stop paying out these bonuses, at least. Like these people have plenty of cash and can live a very affluent lifestyle while other people are suffering, and that they can still have that horrible inequality with, and actually run their company in a way where they improve. I just don't understand. It bothers me that people start businesses and run businesses for the purpose of simply generating cash. Like you should want to also do something good for the world.
Yes,
contribute something, not just take and take and take.
Well, forced reinvestment. The problem is that if these companies actually had to compete with each other, then they would have to force reinvestment. Where in a true capitalist society, you could leave to go to the company that has better speeds and more reliability. But because you often have one choice of provider in the area, you don't have that luxury of being able to switch. Either you don't have service at all or you do.
Do you think there's like an easy, not an easy, but like a solution at all, a reasonable solution that would fix, that could create competition? Because it's hard when they own the lines.
Here's the thing, that when Google Fiber came in, stagnant markets like in Kansas City and Austin found that those original ISPs invested back into those communities and lowered prices and made them competitive. In a market that has seen rising costs when the costs should go down and the prices should slightly go down or stay the same, instead they're going up.
So do you think if the government says we're not going to put any roadblocks or hurdles in front of any company who wants to develop infrastructure, and you can't do anything about it, Comcast, etc.
I mean, I think
is that the way?
Sadly, I think it's got to be a couple things. It's got to be it's deregulation is actually the truth in this, but the problem is that they like people that are for small government claim they hate regulations, but that's bullshit. It's completely bullshit. The idea of
you think that they don't hate regulations?
No, they do to a degree, but there's a reason why there are so many regulations about who can put things on power lines.
Mm-hmm.
Now, or not power lines, but utility lines.
If we didn't have so many shitty people in this country, or people in general, I mean, like I feel like it's a little redundant to say people are shitty. We're all shitty to some degree. We're all great. We all have capacities for everything, and you know, if the situation allows for it, and you can get away with something easily and justify it, which is not hard. Is the easiest part to justify bad behavior. I mean, you can do it and not even realize it. I think that's why we have so many people when these scandals come out. I mean, there's some that are just assholes and they know what they're doing, but there are others who are like, this isn't me. They seem legitimately confused, and I believe that. It doesn't excuse what they did most of the time, but it's a situation where it's like the circumstances caused their behavior to change, and they justified and didn't realize how terrible it was.
I think some people are awful and probably realize it if they think deep down inside.
We got a little bit of everybody, but
they justify it by saying, "Oh, it was always this way." So the reason I say they don't they actually do like regulations is look at like what happens is you have the corporations will form some kind of lobbying group that represents all the major providers, which collusion is illegal for businesses to collude and raise prices illegally and price fixing, and they do all the time. There have been lots of cases that have been shown for companies colluding, whether it's the ConAgra scandal back in the 90s, where ConAgra and a bunch of agricultural companies across the world were price fixing the price of corn and different stocks, like that. With these giant corporations that are ISPs, they basically create these lobbying groups that then go and lobby to make it difficult to put fiber cable installed in areas, or will put roadblocks for a competitor to come in, like Google, to come in. And so what they'll do is they'll do large scale actions with like the FCC, but then go into city councils and make it difficult on a state level and a city level. So when you've got to go and lobby a city council, and those companies have been lobbied by, like in Kansas, you have this stupid bullshit lobbying group that's made up of the major ISPs that say, it's difficult to get in and compete with us, so we're going to make it and say, it's to protect the pole. So you can get permission to go on the pole, but you can't touch someone else's wire. So it becomes this loophole where you can go and install your wires in the pole, but they can't touch someone else's.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing is it's really easy, I think, to say we need more competition in a market, but there's also this problem of sabotage. It makes me think back to the PayPal mafia.
Yeah.
In which, just looking at a small piece of that, eBay would fight to shrink PayPal's logo on auctions, so it would to promote their own thing, which I forgot the name of it. It was weird. But they would do stuff like that, and I think Elon Musk, did he do X.com? Was that his?
I think so.
I think so, yeah, because he paid like $1 million for that domain or something.
Yeah.
Good use of the cash there, buddy.
When you have more money than God, it doesn't really matter.
Well, he didn't have the time, though.
Not the time, but I'm sure he...
I mean, he had the $1 million, but it's also just like, wouldn't it be better to not get that domain name and just say... I mean, obviously the PayPal... I mean, the whole thing of... He was ousted because of the PayPal name. They wanted to use that, and like to anybody, that was obviously the right decision. But he was so, don't pay $1 million for a domain. See how far that can backfire. But, it's not to... I think Elon Musk he means very well and is trying to do good things and is realizing the difficulty of it, if anyone's been paying attention to the news, especially more than I have lately. But, I mean, he's obviously run into some of that trouble lately. But, yeah, and I don't think he's necessarily a bad guy or anything, but, when he was younger, that was a problem. But there's even X.com, I think they sent out bots or something to try to sabotage their competition. It's like, why don't you just make a really good product? And I mean, you can't, because everyone's going to try to sabotage each other, but like, don't do that. We need to, I think that there needs to be a solution to that too. If we need to regulate something, it should be, it should be to prevent people from doing bad shit to each other.
Yes. I think that's the thing, is that these companies, if they don't want true competition, when Google showed up in the market, that stimulated an investment in that area, but they didn't want it. So they make it difficult. They say, oh yeah, capitalist society, competition's great. But then they'll make the field of entry filled with barbed wire and moats and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's really exempt from that. I mean, there are obvious, like 37 Signals is an example of a company who's like, we do good enough. We make $10 million a year. I mean, this is like a while ago when I watched a talk that David Heinemeier Hansen is, I can't remember the whole name, but one of the founders. He put in he wrote about or did a talk, a TED talk or something, I don't remember which, where he discussed how, like, we make $10 million a year. Hopefully, they've grown a little bit since then because of inflation, but they make $10 million a year, and we're like, we're not publicly traded. We make a good product. We want to continue doing that, and it's enough money for us. We're comfortable and happy. And it's like, if only more people could make that choice, because you don't need to be making billions a year. You don't have to be that rich. It's not, what is that going to bring you? If the only thing that I would want it for, and I think Musk is a great example of why this doesn't actually happen, I would want it for the power to be able to actually subvert some of these problems. But he's trying, and he's had some success, but he has, I think, I don't know if he shares or I share with him, maybe I should say, the problematic optimism of wanting to help on that scale. I mean, because with all that money and this, some of the smartest people in the world at his disposal, they still can't, they can try all they want, and they still make plenty of mistakes because they're dealing with new stuff or stuff that they just don't know that much about right now. And so it's like, what's the point of having all that money if you can't even do good with it at that point? Not that he can't. It's just he's picking some difficult thing. I think he wants to be a superhero, which is fine. Like, go for it. He's doing it in a positive way. But
yeah, I think it's interesting to see what Google is trying to do is smart, because they're obviously their whole ethos is still to make money. But I think the idea of innovating and forcing companies to change and update, plus their future relies on there being high-speed, uncapped internet. And a company like Charter or Spectrum now, these companies that are like integrating with media and entertainment companies, their future does too. And I think they're getting to the party too, almost too late, which is if you're investing in the future of looking at like what Kansas City forced the Google's hand by basically being this weird test city for innovation and trying to prove that they would grow as this economic hub for having access to gigabit speed internet. And people
I was so jealous back in 2007. I was like, why isn't that Boston?
I know, why is that not LA? Why is it not every city kept trying? And the idea of innovation did come to Kansas City, not at the level they were expecting. But still, companies moved there or reinforced their headquarters to have that kind of access. And I think it's like an oasis. The idea of what you can do with that kind of streaming service is huge. Yeah,
and if you look, isn't that a shipping hub now, and Amazon has a base there?
Yes.
Yeah, so but I don't know if that's necessarily better, if that's like good infrastructure that you want, having Amazon put a warehouse there, because that tends to, from what I've seen statistically, be worse for the job market, because it kills a bunch of other jobs that are potentially better, not by a lot, but like, Walmart or Amazon, which one would you rather be I don't want to say slave, but because it's not that, obviously, but it's not, like being worked to the bone.
Yeah.
Where you have to take painkillers every day, which, I don't know how many people that actually accounts for, but I've read several accounts of people being like, oh, it's just, I have to take ibuprofen when I come in every morning. And then we talked about the lines last week and all of that, so we don't need to rehash, but yeah, all of it's a big problem. And I think to bring this back to live streaming, well, with all the, I wonder, I've always wondered about the push to live streaming, like why? why do why so many companies want to take this really complicated thing and make that the next feature? Like, why is that a benefit? Because one of the things that I love about the internet is that content gets made, it gets posted, I watch it when I want to watch it. I don't have to tune into anything.
I think it's because I think there's something interesting. Like even porn is going in that direction with cams.
Yeah.
I think.
I think it's gone that direction.
Well, yeah, no, and the reason I think it's twofold.
But that makes sense though for the interactivity part.
I think the same thing for this is people like being. It's why sporting events are more popular live. It's the idea that you're watching something simultaneously. There's a weird thing about
yeah, that's true.
It's being connected to something and feeling like you could influence it. With porn cams, it's fascinating actually. The world
you literally can influence it.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is that you are part of a bigger community. You're influencing something potentially, and you're feeling like part of this community. It's very even though it's technically you on a screen far away, you can feel like you're bonded with this community.
Yeah.
What's weird with porn streaming,
and that definitely makes sense for YouTube now that you're putting in that context. It's just like, it feels like, oh, well, what would push the ISPs into having to remove caps is if there's a technology that literally everybody wants.
And, I mean, we're moving in that space where kids more and more are wanting to stream and connect on this level.
Yeah, but with the ISPs as they are right now, it is vastly... Is that the right word? I don't know, whatever. It's much easier to do it on your phone than it is to do with software. The software we're using to record the show right now is for live streaming, and we didn't live stream when we started using it because YouTube found a video that they thought was porn on the account, which was not porn. And it's a long story. I'm not going to explain it right now, but it had to do with the art show, and Darren made it. For those of you who are still familiar with Darren, didn't come into this show after he moved on or listened to Awkward, then you know him. But anyway, he made a video, and it looks like porn, and it was sponsored by Pornhub. And it has Pornhub's logo on it, so I can understand why people got confused. But it was up for a year, and then it got flagged and removed.
That's
and
so stupid. Our
streaming rights got taken down immediately for one strike. And I was like, it's not porn. I know it looks like porn, but it's a satire. And it's very clear that it's a satire if you watch it. But it's not clear if you watch like 5 seconds of it. And YouTube gives you like less than a tweet to make your case. So I did my best, and they just responded with no. So we didn't have our streaming for that long, but it's also, just getting this video stuff to work locally without the streaming is quite difficult when you're running the board yourself, which is why I haven't jumped in. And also I don't really think there's a huge demand for people to sit and watch the show live, because when we have done it live before, there were definitely some excited people, but we'd have technical difficulties. It was hard to do the show and listen to the questions. Like, we need to get more people in here at some point. So I'm focusing on like what we can do to grow a little bit more. I'm actually writing a book on that, believe it or not.
Nice.
Well, that's part of my job for Airtable.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
I wasn't I'm not an expert, but I'm going to be soon, and so I want to try to implement some of that stuff. And I've been learning from a lot of people from VidCon this year, and also just other resources that I have through them. So that hopefully we'll be able to like do more with video in a way that makes sense rather than just posting the shows. Although people are watching the videos, I found out. I didn't realize, but I felt like no one was watching, so we never would hear that. But someone wrote in recently. Speaking of which, we should wrap up this topic because one, we got to wrap up in general, but also we have 2 questions now that we haven't addressed. So is there anything more you wanted to say? Because we didn't even really talk about the console streaming that much.
No, we did. It's just getting there. It's just it's all part of the bigger picture. So it's the future, but let's hope our infrastructure can adjust for it.
I guess I was just curious. Because Nintendo's moving more into the internet, which scares me. Because they're not so good at that.
Yeah, they're good at making games and they have controllers, but not so much on internet connection and friends.
Although I have to give them credit. I wanted to see if I wasn't so impatient to play a game early that I had preloaded, but I thought, it opens and it's not opening because of the date, and I'm not, I didn't have the thought, I'll just change my time zone and then I can, or change the actual date and then it will just load. Obviously, it checks in with the server. If you even try to open the software, it's clear it's doing that. Otherwise, it would just react immediately. But I thought, I could use a man-in-the-middle proxy to give it the wrong information, but I couldn't mimic the certificate accurately. I didn't try that hard for one, but I was like, no one's succeeded in this, so it's probably not going to work. But, or as far as I know, no one's even attempted. I couldn't find anything online about that, but it's, I I was like, I wonder if I could do that just to know. So they're not. It's good. That made me feel better, honestly, that I couldn't get through because they at least know enough to stop that kind of attack, which is not a well-known attack. So good on them for that. But they also will not allow me to transfer a save game on Richard's Switch to mine. Because I played a game. We played it on his because he bought the game and it went into his console, and we're like, we'll just leave it in there. It's not going to matter. But now I want to play the DLC, and he doesn't. So we can get it on his, but then he has to pay for it, and then I have to send him money. Obviously, first world problems, we can get around them, not a big deal, but
it's still annoying.
It's stupid. Like, why can't we transfer save data from one to another? Like, they could absolutely do that. But this is them being paranoid about cheating and whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a couple of questions, both from Chris, but different Chris's. Okay, so Christopher Hardwick, not to be confused with Chris Hardwick, writes, in episode 200, Whitson mentioned he was now working as a freelance writer. As someone far removed from the world of professional writing, I'm curious to learn more about how being a freelance writer works and how one gets started in the field. Thanks. Okay, so I sent Chris a pretty detailed response of this, but like I said last week, I promised I'd answer it on the next show, forgot, and here we are. I guess, Tommy, do you have anything you want to...
I mean, it depends on what kind of writing. I assume he means like blogger.
And stuff,
yeah, I think the only thing is just building up a portfolio of stuff. You have to kind of start doing it to do it. So you're not going to get paid immediately. You have to have a resume of some kind, and it's best to build up writing by starting that, whether it's reviews or just following the kind of stuff that you like and doing it, and just doing it for free because you're not going to get paid at first.
I just remembered something, so I can add something to this answer that I didn't put in the email. I have to find it, but there are, I think Whitson actually, Pash might have in the beginning, Adam Pash might have in the beginning written this, and then Whitson updated it after he became editor, but there was a post on Lifehacker that would go out with any hiring notices or whatever you want to call it, job postings, that would say, this is how to be a good Lifehacker writer. Like, these are the things that we're looking for in your writing or your abilities, not like on your resume, but in like a sample you would send. And so that actually, Whitson, I'm pretty sure, has the most recent version of that. He detailed a lot of what I would probably say here or have said when answering privately. But, you know, one of those things on that list is what Tommy said, is that you need to have a portfolio, and you also need to be willing to do a little bit for free. And the thing, I mean, you can just basically find smaller blogs or even some established ones. Generally, the ones that like review apps or are not, you know, a big news site or something like that will pay you a little bit or take you on on a trial period as like an intern, and then after a month or two, you can get upgraded to a paid employee, but the payment's not going to be a lot. Like, you're going to be doing it on the side. So yeah, you kind of like have to go find those writing opportunities. But beyond that, there's the blog that you can start on your own. You have something like Medium where you can like target trends and actually get some attention from the writing that you're doing. But you want to be able to send writing samples. You should have some that you did that you wanted to write, and then you should have a few that you've done professionally that you might have to just contribute on a free basis. I
mean, yeah, I would honestly say if you have a blog or something that is not getting a lot of coverage on something that fits within their theme or their subject, and they're not covering it, you should offer to cover it for free and try it. It's really a lot of reaching out. I have friends that do this full time, and if they're journalists, freelance journalism is a really tough racket. And
yeah, it's hard to make money if you're like, for Whitson, it's
especially
easy because Whitson is like, you can't not like Whitson.
And it's also a chicken or egg scenario too, where it's like if you're established, it's easier to get work than if you aren't.
Yeah, that as well. But I mean, it was like with Whitson, he got his job at Lifehacker, I think, due to his charm and interest, and he's also very good at it, obviously. But but you know, it's like that doesn't matter a whole lot when you're being hired, because no one knows if you're good at it until they have you working. You can maybe a great writer and suck at blogging because blogging is really intense. Like, I think people, before they get into it, they don't realize how much work it is. It doesn't seem like that, but you have, like, one of the things that when you get into it more and your workload goes from that, like, I started at 3 posts a day, which doesn't probably seem like a lot, but when you have to find interesting content and even write a 300-word article about it and proofread it and then answer comments, which is one of the hardest parts because you don't know when they're coming in or when they're going to matter. when you can fit them into your day when you're planning for the next day. Like, it would take like a day. Eventually we had to say everybody gets a day off from writing so they could write their feature.
Yeah.
And even that was still not, I mean, like, we were still writing the same amount of posts. We just would have more of them on other days. And I didn't get a day off because I actually only worked 4 days a week at that point. So I got paid for my day off. Basically, I had already funneled my work that way, so I had to suck it up. But that was fine because I had a better deal. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't think about having to create images for your posts, how to figure out how they look editorially, and you're lucky if you had someone on staff that did what I did, which was, I wrote like everybody else, but I also did art direction, and we hired some designers to come in, and I actually wrote software to allow people to submit a request for an image for their post in advance, and then the designers would be freelance and they could do whatever else they want. They could work when they wanted. But they would go in and just claim an image that they were going to do. It would notify the person, then then they would make the image. It would get uploaded. The person would get notified about that, and then the submitter would mark it as completed or ask for a revision, and then they would get paid. It would invoice Lifehacker for them pretty much, and say like, this is how much they did, and this is the type of image that they worked on, because they could specify if they had to do a hand illustration, which they get paid more for. So that it was one of those things, and it was a good portfolio builder where people didn't have to make a huge time commitment or like, I guess, they could build their portfolio, still get some money, but it was less than they probably should have been making. I mean, in my feeling with it was, I think everybody took longer to make images than I did, and oftentimes they were better because I would go through quickly, but I could throw out a header image for most posts that were fun and applicable and didn't just, weren't totally on the nose, but added subtext in 5 to 10 minutes. And normally it would take someone else like 20 to 30 minutes, and I thought they would catch up with me eventually, but no one ever did.
That's impressive.
No, I think that it's just I don't think I managed them well enough.
Oh.
I should have spent more time on the training, working through with them, but I had done that with a design intern that we had initially, and I think it drained me because I tried so hard to get him to. He was really talented, but he was like, I don't know if he was burnt out or what the situation was, but he just stopped producing work well, and had to let him go. It was funny. No one ever got fired from Lifehacker. It was usually like no one ever really fired anyone. I was like the first person to fire anybody.
You monster.
Well, I mean, like, I don't mind doing it. It's I tend to be nicer about it. I mean, I think Whitson probably would have been fine. Pash, he had a hard time firing people. I mean, like, I understand it. I'm not criticizing. It's not a pleasant experience, but I don't mind doing it because I would rather know that, like, I know if I'm doing it, I know that I'm going to do everything I can to make it less shitty. So, that's why I don't mind doing it. I hate it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
it's not fun.
Yeah, but anyway, got off topic a little bit there. The basically have a body of work, ask people, if you can write for them, if they're, what opportunities they have for writing, that you're just starting out. So, you can do more if you're getting paid, but I mean, this is generally the way to pitch this. You can do more if you're getting paid something. But you're willing to write for free for a while to build up the portfolio if there's some sort of internship thing, or just in general they'll take submissions. And then you just have to get good at pitching, because they're not going to take anything if you can't pitch a good article. Get to know the sites that you're going to be pitching to, and then know how to distill that idea into a sentence. Literally a sentence. You should be able to give them a headline that's compelling and give them a lead that's compelling. And beyond that, you should be able to get your pitches through on that. You should not need to explain it more. There are some articles where that will be necessary, but when you start out, don't write those until you have a relationship, because otherwise you're gonna. It makes it seem like you don't know how to do the job, and if you can show that you know how to do the job at that level, that you can say this is a great idea that everyone's going to understand right away. Then that's great. So look at what is compelling to you on the blogs that you want to write for. And even if you're not approaching them right away, you can see how that person, think about what excited you to read this. Why were you compelled? And if it's like a I don't want to shit on BuzzFeed, but if it's one of those BuzzFeed tricks where it's like you won't believe what happens next, and you just feel compelled because it's manipulative, don't do that. Don't look at the ones that are hyperbole or manipulative, unless it's sometimes a little hyperbole makes sense when something's really awesome. But that is you want to find ones that are like legitimately compelling, and so just learn by example, do your own thing, get feedback from people that or like send it to people that you would want to give you feedback on it. I want to offer to help, but I feel like if I do that, then I'm going to get more than I can handle. But that's not to say, like, it's not like you couldn't send it to me or to Whitson, or I'm not volunteering anybody, but people that if there are people that have been around the block and you would like to get their take on it, and you, especially if you're just sending like a headline and a lead, like, does this sound interesting to you? That's something that any of us could handle. And I can at least speak for myself and say that I'd be happy to, to look at a headline and a lead. Like, even I have time for that. So it's, just get feedback, learn from what works. And I mean, I could write a book on this, but, and the gist of it is kind of, build that portfolio, like Tommy said, and get and make it out of your own stuff, make it out of work that you can get, because there are plenty of blogs that will let you write for free, for sure. Like, if you want to write me an article for free, go ahead. It's going to take me a long time to edit it. I'm going to just be honest about that. I'm super slow. Ask the next person who asked a question, which we'll get to very quickly. But but yeah, I mean, like, if anyone wants to write me an article for free, and you have, you can, obviously, if like you have a long way to go, that's going to be difficult, because I can't take that kind of time. But if anyone wants to do that, then I'll take it. Most people will take that help if they are like, I don't put a lot of effort into the blog because I just can't. I just don't have the time. So anyone who ever wants to contribute, if they have an interesting pitch, I'm absolutely open to that. And I am far from the only blog out there, but there are better blogs to do it for. So do all of that, and you have a shot.
So lightning round, we've got to wrap up very quickly.
Yes,
so
yes.
What's the
other one is from Chris, who actually does write some stuff for the blog, but I do pay him because we have that established relationship already. But anyway, Chris is asking, print your own parts to fix your laptop? Interesting. A machine you can upgrade? Crazy. Anyway, this looked like something that Adam would enjoy experimenting with, or a piece that could be integrated into a number of Tommy's custom projects. Take care. Thanks for the great show. P.S. That's personal, so I'm not going to read that. And then he did forget to send the link, but sent in another email. He's talking about a Earth-friendly computing device called the EOMA68, which is on a new crowdfunding service that I didn't know about called Crowd Supply. Had 150K goal, made 224 and some change, thousand that is. And so they make it so it's easily to upgrade and fix your own computer by using a lot of open source stuff, allowing, as Chris mentioned, 3D printing for it. I actually did not look too much into this because I had forgotten Chris even asked a question, but when I was bringing up the questions for this time, I noticed this. So we'll put a link in the show notes so people can check it out. There's not really, I guess, anything to answer here, but we'll put it in the show notes. You can check out that stuff, and I'll take a more thorough look at it and send it to you, Tommy, and we can...
Yeah, I'm curious to see it.
Yeah, maybe we'll... Just looking at what they're doing now, this would potentially be an interesting interview, at least. But, I mean, we're talking about, like... It looks like, a laptop you can upgrade, and... I mean, I would love to get off of... I would love Linux to become a platform that Adobe would support. I think that would be that's the line where if Adobe is fully supporting Linux or some flavor of Linux, then Linux has won the operating system wars in terms of being a viable alternative. Because I am totally fine with Linux. I mean, OS 10 or Mac OS is Unix based. I think, I don't want to guess wrong, so I'm not going to. But Chrome OS is like that too. There are a lot, there's a lot of good stuff to work with there, and at least back in the day, it was more stable for Mac OS. But anyway, fingers crossed this continues to go well. I hope we're headed towards a future where there's less control from larger companies. And Apple released new MacBooks today the day we're recording, and they're very expensive, and they still only come with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And if you want, I think Mac Rumors said if you want like the full-fledged version if you want to upgrade the 15-inch fully, it's like $6,600 for a laptop. And I'm like, there's nothing that machine can do at that level of an upgrade that justifies that cost.
That's insane.
And I really want to get off of, I would love to get off of Mac. I know it's not going to happen anytime soon, but I would love to get off of it because of the cost.
I look forward to the day.
Yeah, I mean, if Hackintoshing, if it could just get more stable, then I would be doing that. And what I don't understand is why a PC manufacturer doesn't make a Linux laptop that is completely Mac compatible and say, like, yeah, we're doing this for Linux, and then just send Tony Mac and some of the others an email being like, just nudge, this will run Mac OS if you go there. There's a huge market for this. I mean, like if you're gonna make a Linux laptop in general, or even a Windows laptop would work fine. Like it's the same hardware. If you're gonna make one of those, then why not make it compatible? Draw extra customers in. I don't know if there's like a potential legal issue there, but there shouldn't be because it's just hardware. And as long as they don't directly promote that you can install Mac OS on it, you're good. Anyway, like Tommy said, we have to wrap up, and I'm keeping things here. So thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week. And if you have any questions, we got around to them finally, and I'm going to keep my eye on it. So awkwardhuman.com/supercharged is the place to go. So do that. Ask us some questions. We'll answer more of those, and send in any topics you want us to cover. We're going to be trying to focus the show more as the weeks go on. So we're looking for input and ideas that are a little bit easier just because of the schedule changes and all of that Tommy and I have both gotten super busy. So we want to make sure we can still bring the show, but do something that, we're not, flying by the seat of our pants half the time, or missing stuff or whatever. We want to do a better show for everybody. So if you have input, things you want to hear, things you miss, something that can be done, not to, we can't broaden the scope is, I guess, the thing. But we're going to try to get more guests, and we're going to try to do a more focused show. So please send in your input. awkwardhuman.com/supercharged is the place to do that. Ask questions, etc. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back at you next week. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Supercharged. If you'd like to send in a comment or a question, you can do so on awkward.email. You just go on your web browser to awkward.email. It's actually a website. And you can call or text 509-AWKWARD instead if you'd like to just skip all of that and do it from your phone. Also, if you'd like to check out some of our other shows, we've got a lot of great shows now, and we're having more every day, or, eventually. You can do that on awkwardhuman.com/podcast. Go check it out. We've got a lot of good stuff, and we hope that you'll be listening every week. Thanks.